The King's illness is a reality check for the firm. It means there's added impetus to ensure Prince William is match fit for a possible call-up to the top job.
Tensions inside the royal family may be deeper than the public realizes. Behind the polished smiles and carefully planned appearances, reports are now suggesting that Prince William made a quiet but highly noticeable move ahead of Princess Anne's important event by removing several guests connected to Queen Camilla. The decision was never publicly announced, yet insiders claim it sent a powerful message throughout royal circles. So what really happened behind palace doors? And what could this reveal about the growing tensions within the monarchy? But what do you think? Was William truly protecting tradition or provoking division? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more similar content. Windsor gates closed without warning. Minutes before Princess Anne's important event at Windsor Castle was scheduled to begin, confusion spread quietly behind the security barriers. Guests who had already received approval notices suddenly found themselves stopped at the entrance without explanation. Electronic scanners flashed red. Security officers exchanged tense glances. As several names linked to Queen Camilla's social circle were no longer being accepted into the event. At first, many believed it was a technical problem, but the atmosphere changed rapidly when palace staff realized the official guest registry had been altered only moments earlier. The scene outside the hall became increasingly uncomfortable, as aides connected to Camilla's office rushed toward the checkpoint demanding answers. Some guests stood frozen in disbelief, while others attempted to contact palace officials directly. No public announcement was made, and there was no visible confrontation, yet the tension surrounding the removals became impossible to ignore. The silence itself created suspicion. The operation appeared organized, controlled, and deliberate. At the center of the unfolding drama stood Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson. Normally viewed as one of the king's most trusted figures, Thompson carried himself with unusual authority that afternoon. Dressed in a ceremonial uniform, he personally monitored the revised access list and calmly instructed security officers to deny entry to specific individuals. Witnesses reportedly noticed that he offered no apology and no detailed explanation. Those turned away were simply escorted from the area with quiet efficiency. What unsettled many observers was the growing belief that Thompson was not acting alone. Nearby, Prince William was said to be watching events unfold from within the Windsor grounds. His presence, though distant and largely silent, added enormous weight to the situation. Staff members reportedly became cautious the moment his involvement was suspected. Some believed the Prince of Wales had personally approved the last-minute removals ahead of Princess Anne's event, while others argued that security teams may have acted independently in response to internal concerns. The background to the controversy only deepened the mystery. In recent months, Queen Camilla's social network had appeared increasingly visible at royal gatherings, especially during periods when King Charles III reduced public duties because of his health. Critics inside palace circles allegedly worried that certain figures were gaining too much influence around important royal functions. Supporters of Camilla, however, viewed the claims as exaggerated and politically motivated. As guests continued disappearing from the entrance list, the atmosphere around Windsor shifted from ceremonial preparation to quiet institutional conflict. Princess Anne's event still moved forward with military precision, but behind the scenes, the removals raised serious questions about loyalty, authority, and the balance of power inside the monarchy. More importantly, the incident suggested that powerful decisions were now being made silently, long before the public ever noticed. For palace insiders, the exclusions felt less like a security adjustment and more like the opening move in a struggle for control. Whether William intended to send a warning or protect Anne's event remained uncertain, but the message across Windsor was unmistakable. Later that evening, palace corridors reportedly remained unusually active as senior aides reviewed the updated access decisions, while whispers of an internal reshaping continued to circulate among staff who understood that what happened at Windsor was not an isolated security adjustment, but a signal of something far larger unfolding within the monarchy itself. Something had shifted inside Windsor, yet no one was willing to admit how or why. Who altered the guest registry at the last possible moment, and what were they trying to prevent? Why did senior aides freeze instead of intervening? And what was William witnessing? Let's find out. William drew palace battle lines. As preparations continued for Princess Anne's event at Windsor Castle, attention quietly shifted away from the ceremony itself and toward a growing mystery surrounding the guest list. What was meant to be a carefully controlled royal occasion began to develop an undercurrent of uncertainty few outside the inner circle could fully understand. Behind polished planning, subtle disruptions were forming, suggesting something more complex beneath the surface. Staff responsible for security and protocol reported last-minute adjustments that created confusion across departments. What first seemed routine soon appeared far more serious. Names linked to Queen Camilla's social circle were being reviewed again, even after invitations had already been approved and distributed. The quiet rechecks unsettled staff who expected finality in such procedures. Whispers inside the palace suggested that these changes were not procedural, but part of a deeper reassessment underway behind closed doors. At the center of the growing tension was Prince William. Palace insiders noticed his unusual personal interest in planning for Anne's event. His involvement was not formally announced, but was felt through quiet administrative shifts affecting preparation. Reports circulating among staff said William requested access to updated guest records and held discussions with senior aides before proceedings began. This raised questions because royal ceremonies are normally managed through strict protocol rather than direct family intervention. Some described the atmosphere as tense, as if decisions were being reviewed at a higher level than usual within the formal hierarchy of royal administration and oversight without clear explanation to junior staff members present there. The concern centered on influential figures linked to Camilla's expanding social network. In recent months, members of the royal household had grown uneasy about how frequently certain donors, advisors, and high-profile contacts appeared near key royal functions. Critics believed these individuals were gaining visibility during a period when King Charles III had reduced public activity due to ongoing health struggles. Supporters of Camilla rejected these claims and viewed criticism as attempts to isolate her from influence within the palace. The disagreement remained largely unspoken publicly, yet inside the institution it shaped conversations more than was openly admitted among senior members involved in planning discussions quietly. For William, the situation carried deeper institutional implications. Some insiders believed he feared Anne's carefully organized event could be overshadowed by private interests and political optics linked to Camilla's allies. Anne is widely seen as disciplined and traditional, and reports suggested she wanted precision and restraint. This aligned with William's vision for a controlled monarchy. Observers noted even small adjustments reflected a broader effort to preserve formality of the occasion under increasing scrutiny across internal advisory circles and household governance teams within Windsor operations, without public acknowledgement or comment issued. As revised guest lists quietly circulated behind closed doors, security teams received updated instructions. Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson oversaw parts of the process with calm authority, reinforcing suspicions that the operation had support from powerful figures inside the palace structure. His presence was not unusual, but the timing drew attention among those familiar with royal operations. Guests linked to Camilla's circle discovered that access restrictions were deliberate. Some were denied entry entirely, while others were removed from seating arrangements before arriving at Windsor. The silence surrounding these changes deepened the sense of internal uncertainty across the institution as events approached. Prince William's involvement raises deeper questions about what was really happening behind palace doors. Who was powerful enough to force a private review of Anne's guest list? And why were figures tied to Camilla suddenly seen as a threat? And what comes after this decision? Keep watching. Tradition shielded, Windsor from chaos. Princess Anne arrived at Windsor Castle determined that her event would not become another chapter in the growing tensions surrounding the royal household. While confusion continued quietly outside the gates, preparations inside the historic halls moved forward with almost military precision. Staff members adjusted schedules, corrected seating arrangements, and redirected guests without drawing public attention. To observers, the ceremony appeared calm and carefully organized, but behind the polished image, palace officials were working urgently to contain a situation that threatened to overshadow the entire occasion. Security presence around the castle grounds had also been subtly reinforced, not in an openly alarming way, but in a manner that signaled heightened awareness among senior aides. Entry points were monitored more closely, and communication between departments became noticeably faster and more structured than usual. Even minor adjustments required confirmation through multiple channels, reflecting an atmosphere where nothing was being left to chance. For Anne, maintaining discipline during the event seemed deeply important. Throughout her public life, she had earned a reputation as one of the monarchy's most dependable and traditional figures. Unlike other members of the royal family who often attracted headlines through personal controversies, Anne was associated with duty, structure, and loyalty to royal protocol. That reputation now appeared central to the atmosphere surrounding the gathering at Windsor. Reports suggested she had little patience for social maneuvering or private factions attempting to influence official royal functions. Those who worked closely with her described a tone of quiet authority in her instructions that morning. There was no theatrics, no visible frustration, only firm clarity about how the day was expected to proceed. Staff understood quickly that deviations from plan would not be entertained, and that the success of the event depended entirely on precision and restraint rather than ceremony or display. As revised guest lists circulated through palace offices, staff reportedly received updated instructions about where remaining attendees should be seated. Several individuals linked to Queen Camilla's wider social network were no longer included in key positions within the hall. Their places were quietly filled by long-standing royal insiders, representatives connected to traditional charities, military organizations, and figures associated with Queen Elizabeth II's era. The changes were subtle enough to avoid immediate public attention, yet significant enough for experienced palace aides to recognize a shift taking place. Some staff members reportedly hesitated before implementing the adjustments, aware of the sensitivity surrounding even the smallest seating change. However, the instructions were clear, and the chain of approval left little room for hesitation. The result was an environment that looked unchanged from the outside, yet felt entirely different to those managing its internal structure. The atmosphere became even more revealing as Prince William and Princess Anne appeared increasingly aligned throughout the event. Neither publicly addressed the removals, but their coordination behind the scenes reportedly left a strong impression on palace staff. William's reported involvement in the guest review process seemed to match Anne's insistence on strict order and institutional focus. Together, they projected the image of a monarchy attempting to protect itself from distractions during a period already strained by King Charles III's ongoing health concerns. Between formal exchanges and ceremonial appearances, aides noted brief but meaningful moments of communication between the two, often without words, as if decisions had already been settled long before anyone else was informed. This silent alignment added to the growing sense that the event was not just ceremonial, but strategically significant. Supporters of Camilla privately questioned whether the removals had gone too far. Some believed the exclusions unfairly targeted individuals whose only connection was social proximity to the Queen. Others suspected deeper tensions inside the palace hierarchy were now influencing decisions once handled quietly through private discussion. Yet among traditional royal circles, there appeared to be growing support for a firmer approach. To them, Anne's event represented something larger than one ceremony. It became a symbolic defense of continuity and discipline during an uncertain moment for the monarchy. By the time the ceremony settled into its formal rhythm, the immediate disruption had largely disappeared from public view. Still, the quiet adjustments inside Windsor left lasting questions behind. The event no longer seemed like a simple royal gathering. Instead, it revealed a palace increasingly divided between competing visions of influence, tradition, and control, with Anne and William standing firmly together at the center of that unfolding struggle quietly. With Anne refusing disruption, something subtle begins shifting behind the ceremony walls. Who quietly approved the revised seating changes? And why are old royal insiders suddenly returning? And most importantly, what does this alignment between Anne and William signal for the monarchy's future? Let's unravel the truth. Palace phones rang through midnight. Behind the polished image presented to the public, the atmosphere inside royal circles changed dramatically after the removals at Windsor Castle. What began as quiet confusion outside Princess Anne's event quickly turned into panic within Queen Camilla's wider social network. Throughout the evening, palace offices reportedly received a flood of calls from guests, advisors, and influential figures desperate to understand why approved invitations had suddenly become meaningless. Some believed a mistake had occurred during security checks, while others immediately feared something far more deliberate was unfolding behind closed doors. For many connected to Camilla's circle, the incident carried a sense of public humiliation that extended far beyond one event. Several wealthy donors and longtime social allies reportedly viewed the removals as a direct signal that their standing inside royal spaces had changed overnight. Until that moment, many had assumed their access to major royal functions was secure. Instead, they found themselves quietly excluded without warning, explanation, or opportunity to appeal the decision. The silence from palace leadership only intensified the unease spreading through those affected. As speculation grew, attention once again turned toward Prince William. Reports suggesting he personally reviewed the guest list before Princess Anne's ceremony created fears that the Prince of Wales was beginning to tighten control over royal access and internal operations. Supporters of William argued that the actions reflected a necessary effort to protect the monarchy's image during a sensitive period marked by King Charles III's ongoing health concerns. Critics, however, questioned whether the removals crossed an invisible line between institutional oversight and personal power. Inside Buckingham Palace in Windsor, the uncertainty reportedly reached staff members as well. Palace aides found themselves caught between competing centers of influence, unsure which office now held final authority over royal events. Some employees allegedly began double-checking instructions with Kensington Palace before carrying out decisions connected to Camilla's household. Others worried privately that even minor mistakes could place their own positions at risk. The atmosphere became increasingly cautious, with conversations lowering into whispers whenever the subject of the removal surfaced. Rumors also began circulating that future royal events could face stricter guest controls moving forward. That possibility created deeper anxiety among social figures who had spent years building relationships around palace access and ceremonial appearances. To many observers, the incident no longer appeared isolated. Instead, it looked like part of a broader effort to reshape influence inside the monarchy itself. For Queen Camilla's allies, the emotional impact was impossible to ignore. The realization that invitations could be withdrawn so suddenly exposed how fragile palace status could become during periods of internal uncertainty. At the same time, William and Anne's growing alignment suggested that a more disciplined and carefully controlled royal structure might already be taking shape behind the scenes. What happened at Windsor no longer seemed like a temporary controversy. It increasingly resembled the early stages of a deeper struggle over the monarchy's future direction. Inside Camilla's circle, confusion turns into something far more unsettling. Was this really a mistake, or a calculated message no one was meant to decode? Who is next to be cut off, and what hidden rules are now silently reshaping access behind palace doors? Stay glued. Charles confronted palace power shift. As tensions surrounding Princess Anne's event continued spreading through Windsor Castle, attention slowly turned toward King Charles III. What began as confusion over blocked guests had evolved into something far more serious, forcing the monarch into a difficult position between his wife, Queen Camilla, and the growing authority of Prince William and Princess Anne. Reports from inside royal circles suggested Charles was informed about the removals only after concerns inside the palace had already intensified. By then, the situation was no longer a private disagreement over invitations. It had become a visible sign of shifting influence within the monarchy itself. The timing made the pressure even more sensitive. Charles was already navigating ongoing health challenges that had reduced parts of his schedule and increased dependence on senior family members to maintain stability around royal duties. During that period, William and Anne reportedly became more involved in internal operations tied to ceremonial planning and institutional management. Supporters viewed their actions as necessary protection for the monarchy during uncertainty. Others questioned whether the transition of influence was beginning faster than expected. As palace discussions reportedly continued behind closed doors, one concern appeared to dominate every conversation. Officials feared that if internal divisions became public, the monarchy could face damaging scrutiny at a moment when stability mattered most. The removals connected to Anne's event were already generating tension inside royal households, and there was growing pressure to prevent the conflict from escalating further. Staff members reportedly became increasingly careful about leaks, public appearances, and communication between offices. At the same time, conversations surrounding institutional discipline reportedly intensified. William's supporters allegedly argued that tighter oversight was needed to protect royal events from outside influence and preserve public confidence in the monarchy. That perspective appeared closely aligned with Anne's long-standing preference for strict protocol and controlled ceremonial standards. Critics, however, saw a more personal dimension developing beneath the official reasoning. Some suspected William's expanding role was gradually reshaping the balance of authority inside the palace, particularly regarding access to royal functions and administrative decisions. Rumors also circulated that William was gaining broader oversight influence across royal operations beyond Anne's event alone. Although no public announcement confirmed such claims, insiders reportedly noticed subtle changes in how approvals, guest coordination, and internal reviews were being handled. For many observers, the growing alignment between William and Anne no longer looked temporary. It appeared increasingly structured and deliberate. For Queen Camilla, the emotional implications reportedly became impossible to ignore. Allies close to her circle allegedly recognized that the atmosphere inside the palace had changed significantly after the Windsor removals. Access that once seemed secure now appeared conditional, and the quiet confidence surrounding her social network had begun fading under mounting institutional pressure. As Charles faced mounting demands to preserve unity while avoiding deeper confrontation, the conflict surrounding Anne's event expanded beyond a family disagreement. It now carried the weight of a monarchy quietly confronting questions about succession, authority, and who truly controlled its future. With tensions rising inside the palace, how far does this power struggle truly reach, and who is really steering the future of the monarchy? Is Charles losing control of the crown? Or is a quieter force already reshaping everything behind closed doors, unnoticed, now unfolding? Stay tuned. Windsor quietly entered new territory. In the days following Princess Anne's event at Windsor Castle, the atmosphere inside the royal household reportedly changed in ways that many staff members immediately noticed, but few openly discussed. The guest removals had ended without public confrontation, yet the consequences continued spreading quietly through palace offices and private corridors. What appeared at first to be a temporary security adjustment now seemed connected to something larger unfolding behind the scenes. Across royal operations, subtle shifts in authority were beginning to take shape. Several palace aides reportedly found themselves receiving updated instructions from different offices than before. Administrative responsibilities connected to scheduling, guest coordination, and ceremonial planning were allegedly being reviewed with greater scrutiny. Some staff members quietly adjusted their reporting structures, increasingly looking toward Kensington Palace for approval on matters that once moved through separate royal channels. Though no formal announcement confirmed these changes, insiders reportedly sensed a growing concentration of influence around Prince William and his closest advisors. The situation became more significant because these adjustments followed directly after the controversy surrounding Queen Camilla's social circle. For many observers, the timing did not appear accidental. Instead, it suggested that William's involvement in Anne's event may have represented the beginning of a broader effort to reinforce institutional control throughout the monarchy. Supporters viewed the changes as practical measures during a difficult period for King Charles III, whose ongoing health concerns had created uncertainty around royal operations. Critics questioned whether the monarchy was quietly entering a more centralized era under William's direction. Princess Anne's role also appeared increasingly important during this transition. Long respected for her discipline and loyalty to royal duty, Anne reportedly became a stabilizing figure for officials concerned about maintaining traditional standards. Staff members allegedly viewed her as a protector of protocol at a moment when palace influence and public image were becoming deeply sensitive issues. Her alignment with William seemed to strengthen perceptions that a new internal structure was taking form around experience, discipline, and institutional continuity. Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson also became an important symbol within the changing atmosphere. After overseeing security operations connected to the guest removals, his visible presence beside William drew growing attention from palace insiders. Thompson no longer appeared to many observers as simply a ceremonial figure. Instead, he represented the disciplined enforcement of the monarchy's evolving priorities. His calm handling of the Windsor situation reportedly reinforced the belief that powerful decisions were now being carried out with quiet precision rather than public confrontation. As discussions continued behind closed doors, royal insiders increasingly described the mood inside the palace as the arrival of a new order. The phrase reflected more than temporary tension between royal households. It suggested a deeper transformation involving authority, access, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. What happened at Anne's event was no longer viewed as an isolated controversy. For many within palace circles, it had become the clearest sign yet that the balance of royal power was already shifting quietly. What really changed behind closed doors as staff quietly shifted reporting lines, and why are insiders suddenly whispering about a new order taking shape? Who is truly steering the palace now, and what role do Anne and Kensington Palace quietly play in this transition? Keep watching. William shapes new royal order. In the aftermath of the Windsor event involving Princess Anne's gathering, the atmosphere inside the royal household continued to shift in ways that could not be ignored. What began as quiet guest removals linked to Queen Camilla's circle was now being viewed as part of a wider transformation inside the monarchy. Within palace circles, discussions reportedly turned toward how authority was being redistributed between senior figures, especially as King Charles III continued to manage health challenges that limited his direct involvement. Prince William's role began to appear more central, with aides noticing a stronger level of coordination around his decisions regarding ceremonial planning and internal oversight. Following the earlier removal of guests associated with Camilla's wider social network, some insiders interpreted the move as a signal that access to royal events was becoming more tightly controlled. Others, however, believed the situation reflected concern about protecting Princess Anne's event from becoming overshadowed by competing influences within the palace environment. As attention grew, Princess Anne's influence appeared to strengthen quietly, with her preference for discipline and tradition aligning closely with William's increasingly structured approach. At the same time, Queen Camilla's social network reportedly began to lose momentum, as uncertainty spread among allies who once relied on stable access to royal functions. Palace staff, caught between competing centers of influence, reportedly became more cautious, aware that even routine decisions could now carry political weight. The Windsor event itself gradually came to be seen not just as a ceremonial occasion, but as a turning point in how the monarchy managed internal authority. Reports suggested that the quiet coordination between William and Anne reflected a shared vision of restoring order and reinforcing institutional discipline across royal operations. Meanwhile, King Charles III remained in a difficult position, balancing the need for unity with growing pressures from both traditionalists and reform-minded advisors. Some insiders believed William's growing authority marked the beginning of a quieter transition that had not yet been formally acknowledged by the institution itself. The changes were not announced publicly, but they were felt in every adjustment of protocol, every revised guest list, and every shift in decision-making responsibility. Observers noted that what began as a single disputed event was now evolving into a broader restructuring of influence within the royal household. This development suggested that the monarchy was moving toward a leaner and more controlled structure, shaped by stricter oversight and clearer lines of authority. To many within the palace, the most striking change was not any single decision, but the growing sense that a new order was quietly forming. The events surrounding Anne's gathering therefore came to represent something larger than protocol, hinting at a shift in how future royal authority might be defined. Ultimately, the quiet removals and the reactions that followed suggested a turning point in the monarchy's direction, where Prince William's approach to leadership appeared increasingly decisive, while uncertainty still lingered over how far these changes would reshape royal balance moving forward. So, what do you think? Was William protecting royal tradition, or quietly asserting control over Camilla's influence ahead of Anne's event? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates.